A giant dragon stood at the edge of the tallest building in the galaxy. Rain crashed against his black scales. Below him, millions of lights. One step forward, and everything would end. The most feared dragon warrior in the Empire was about to jump. Then, a human walked onto the rooftop holding 2 cups of coffee. No weapons. No fear, and he said, "If you're going to die tonight, at least tell me your story first." The dragon froze, because in 20 years, nobody had ever asked if he was okay. Rain crashed against the giant towers of the alien capital. Thunder rolled across the dark sky while endless streams of flying vehicles moved between glowing buildings. Far below the clouds, millions of creatures filled the streets living their normal lives. Nobody noticed the giant black dragon standing alone at the edge of the tallest building in the entire city. His name was Varix. Years ago, entire planets feared him. Enemy fleets used to retreat the moment his shadow appeared in the sky. He was the strongest dragon commander in the Empire. A warrior built for war, built for victory, built to inspire fear, but tonight none of that mattered anymore. Now he looked broken. His black scales had lost their shine. Old battle scars covered his massive body. His wings hung low behind him like dead metal. Even his eyes looked empty. Cold wind pushed against him near the edge of the tower, one small step forward. That was all it would take. One step, and the pain would finally end. Varix slowly looked down at the endless lights far below him. The streets looked tiny from this height, like another world completely separated from him. For years, the Empire blamed him for losing the war against humanity. Thousands of soldiers died under his command during the final battle. Media called him weak coward failure. Citizens mocked him every day on giant public screens. Even other dragons turned away from him. His closest friends disappeared. One by one, nobody wanted to stand beside a fallen hero. At first, Varix tried to fight thee. Pain tried to ignore the whispers and hatred, but eventually the darkness inside his mind became too heavy. He stopped leaving his apartment, stopped answering messages, stopped caring about food, stopped caring about tomorrow. Every night he came to this rooftop, standing closer to the edge each time, and tonight felt different. Tonight he was finally ready to let go. Rain poured harder across the city as Varix slowly closed his eyes. His claws moved toward the very edge, then, suddenly, a voice spoke behind him. Hey, the dragon froze instantly. Slowly, he turned his massive head toward the rooftop door. A human stood there holding 2 steaming cups in his hands. Young, thin, completely ordinary. The human looked soaked from the rain already, but strangely calm. Varix growled softly. Leave. The human looked at the edge of the building, then back at the dragon. You planning to jump? Varix narrowed his eyes dangerously. That is none of your business. Human. Most creatures would have run away immediately after hearing his voice. This human did not move. Instead, he walked closer and sat down near the rooftop edge like this was completely normal. Rain soaked his dark jacket while thunder flashed behind him. The human lifted 1 cup slightly. Coffee Varix stared at him in confusion. Nobody had offered him kindness in years. The dragon slowly stepped back from the edge without even realizing it. Do you even know who I am? The human nodded casually. Yeah, you are Varix. The dragon, General. Everybody hates. Those words hit like a knife. But the human kept speaking calmly. People down there say you are dangerous, broken, a monster. The dragon looked away angrily. Then why are you here? The human stared quietly at the city lights below them. Because I know that Look Varric stayed silent. For a moment, only rain filled the rooftop. Then the human finally spoke again. Name is Ethan. And honestly, you look like someone who has been carrying pain alone for way too long. Something inside Varric's cracked hearing those words. Not anger. Not rage. Something deeper. Because in many years, nobody had asked if he was okay. Nobody cared enough to try, and for the first time in a very long time, the dragon did not want to be alone anymore. The next night, rain returned to the city again. Cold winds moved between the glowing towers while ships crossed the dark sky above the capital. And once again, Varric stood on the rooftop. Part of him hated himself for coming back. He told himself it meant nothing, just curiosity. Nothing more. But deep inside, he knew the truth. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to him like he still mattered. The dragon slowly looked around the rooftop. Then he saw him. Ethan sat near the edge holding 2 cups again. The human smiled the moment he noticed the giant dragon. Thought maybe you would not show up tonight. Varric snorted softly and walked closer. You seem very comfortable around creatures that could kill you easily. Ethan shrugged. You do not look like you want to kill me. The dragon stopped moving for a moment. Most people only saw him as a monster. But somehow this human looked past the scales and claws. Varric slowly sat beside him again. The rooftop stayed quiet for a while. Rain hit the metal floor around them. Far below, the city glowed like endless stars. Ethan handed him a cup. The dragon carefully took it between his claws. Still planning to jump, Varric looked toward the edge silently. I do not know anymore. That answer surprised even him. A few nights ago, he was completely ready to die. Now something inside him felt uncertain, and that scared him more than the edge ever did. Ethan leaned back against a wall. Good. Confused means you are still fighting. The dragon glanced toward him. You speak as if you understand pain very well. The human laughed quietly. Brother, I work 16 hours fixing broken city machines just to afford terrible food and tiny apartments. Trust me, life and I are old enemies. For the first time in years. A small laugh escaped Varric's deep ruff, but real. Even the dragon looked shocked by it. Ethan pointed at him immediately. There it is. Proof you are still alive in there. The dragon shook his head slowly. You should not waste your time. On me, human, I am already broken. Ethan became serious after hearing that. Broken things are not useless. That sentence hit Varric harder than any weapon from war. The dragon stayed silent while thunder echoed across the sky. Then Ethan quietly spoke. Again, you know what destroys people. The fastest, Varric looked toward him. Loneliness, not war, not failure, loneliness. The human stared down at the streets below. When people suffer alone long enough, they start believing terrible lies about themselves. Like nobody cares. Like things will never improve. Like the world would be better without them. Varric slowly tightened his claws around the warm cup, because every word felt true. The dragon lowered his head slightly. The Empire sees weakness as shame. Dragons are taught to hide pain. Ethan nodded. Humans do the same thing sometimes. Pretend everything is fine while falling apart inside. The rooftop became silent again. Then Varric asked something very quietly. Why are you helping me? Ethan looked, surprised by the question at first. Then he smiled sadly, because someone helped me once. The dragon listened carefully. Years ago, Ethan lost his family during the war. He slept on dirty streets, went hungry for days, almost gave up on life many times. Then one stranger sat beside him one night and simply listened. That small moment changed everything. Sometimes people do not need heroes, Ethan said softly. Sometimes they just need one person who stays. Varix looked at the human beside him. A weak, little human sitting in the rain beside a broken dragon. And suddenly the dragon realized something terrifying. For the first time in many years, he was afraid to die, because now someone would actually miss him if he did. 3 weeks passed after the first rooftop meeting, and slowly something inside Varix began changing. The dragon still carried pain, still carried scars, but now his empty apartment no longer felt completely silent. Every night he climbed to the rooftop, and every night Ethan was waiting there with 2 cups of coffee and another terrible joke. Some nights they talked for hours. Some nights they simply watched the city lights together in silence. But for the first time in years, Varix no longer felt invisible. Then everything changed. In a single night, the city alarms exploded without warning. Red emergency lights flashed across every tower in the capital. Warning sirens screamed through the streets below. Citizens froze in confusion. Then fear spread everywhere. A pirate fleet had entered. Orbit massive black warships descended through the clouds like monsters from a nightmare. Explosions lit up the sky. One tower suddenly erupted into flames. Then another. People began running through the streets, screaming in panic. Flying vehicles crashed between buildings trying to escape. The entire capital turned into chaos within seconds. Deep inside his apartment, Varix slowly looked up as emergency broadcasts filled every screen around him. Pirate invasion. Confirmed civilian districts under attack. Military. Response delayed. The dragon walked toward the window overlooking the burning city fire reflected across his dark scales. Somewhere out there, millions of innocent people were terrified, and for the first time in many years, Varix felt something stronger than pain purpose. Meanwhile, far below the towers, Ethan ran through crowded streets helping civilians escape collapsing buildings. Smoke filled the air around him. Children cried, sirens screamed endlessly. A giant pirate ship hovered above the city center, firing plasma blasts into crowded districts. Ethan looked upward in horror as another explosion shook the ground beneath him. Then suddenly all the lights above the city disappeared. Something massive moved through the storm clouds. Citizens slowly looked upward. Giant black dragon burst into the sky with thunder exploding behind him. Varix had returned. His wings spread wide across the burning skyline. For a moment, the entire city froze in disbelief. The broken dragon they mocked for years was flying. Again, pirate ships instantly turned their weapons toward him. Missiles screamed through the air, but Varix moved like a storm-blue dragon. Fire exploded from his jaws and tore straight through the first enemy ship. The warship exploded instantly. Flames rained across the clouds. Citizens below erupted into shocked screams as the dragon attacked another ship, then another. The sky itself became a battlefield. Varix roared so loudly the sound shook windows across the entire capital. For the first time in years, he was not fighting because the Empire ordered him to. He was fighting because he wanted to protect people, because he wanted tomorrow to exist. Pirate fighters surrounded him. From every direction, energy blasts ripped across his scales. One explosion struck his wing hard. The dragon growled in pain but kept flying forward. Then suddenly, emergency broadcasts echoed across every nearby screen. Civilian evacuation failure in District 7. Heavy casualties expected. Varix froze for half a second. District 7. That was Ethan's work zone. The dragon instantly turned toward the lower city far below. he spotted burning streets and collapsing towers, and there standing beside trapped civilians was Ethan. Then Varix saw something far worse, the massive pirate. Flagship slowly lowered above the district. Its giant main cannon began charging with glowing red energy. One shot from that weapon would erase the entire area. Thousands would die instantly, including Ethan. The dragon folded his wings tightly against his body, then dropped from the sky like a black meteor, straight toward the city below, straight toward the cannon blast about to fire. And for the first time in years, Varix was no longer trying to die. Now he was desperately trying to live long enough to save someone else. The giant pirate cannon glowed brighter above the city. Red energy spread across the massive weapon while civilians below screamed and ran through burning streets. Buildings collapsed everywhere, smoke covered the sky, and directly beneath the cannon Ethan stood beside trapped civilians trying to help them escape. He looked upward and froze. The weapon was about to fire. There was nowhere to run. No time left high above the clouds. Varix dove toward the city at terrifying speed. Wind ripped across his scales. Like knives, the dragon could already feel the heat from the cannon charging below. Every instinct inside him screamed to turn away. The blast was too powerful, too dangerous. No creature could survive it. But then Varix remembered something Ethan once told him on the rooftop. Sometimes people just need one person who stays. The dragon roared across the sky and pushed himself even faster. The pirate flagship fired. A giant beam of red destruction exploded downward toward the city streets. Citizens screamed. In terror, Ethan looked up helplessly as the blast raced toward him. Then suddenly, massive black shadow crashed directly into the beam Varix. The explosion swallowed the dragon instantly. Fire covered the entire sky. The shockwave shattered windows across. Nearby towers, the streets below disappeared beneath smoke and burning debris. For several seconds, everything became silent, completely silent. Citizens stared upward in horror. Some believed the dragon was dead. Others slowly lowered their heads. Even Ethan stood frozen, unable to breathe. Then suddenly, something moved inside the firestorm. A giant roar exploded through the smoke so loud it shook the city itself. The flames burst apart, and Varix flew out of the explosion alive. His scales burned bright red. From heat, blood ran down one side of his body. Part of his wing was torn open badly, but his eyes no longer looked empty. Now they burned with fury and purpose. The people below erupted into shocked screams and cheers. The dragon they mocked for years had just saved thousands of lives. Varix turned toward the pirate flagship slowly. The enemy crew panicked immediately. Every weapon on the warship opened fire at once. Hundreds of plasma blasts filled the sky around him. But the dragon kept moving forward. Nothing stopped him now. Not pain, not fear, not even death itself. Varix smashed through the first layer of the ship like a living missile. Metal exploded around him. Fire spread through the giant warship instantly. Pirate soldiers ran screaming through collapsing halls. The dragon tore through the ship with pure rage. One final roar echoed across the burning sky. Then the flagship exploded. The giant warship split apart above the city and crashed into the distant ocean outside the capital. The remaining pirate ships turned and fled immediately. The battle was over. Citizens across the city stared upward in disbelief. The broken dragon had saved them all. But high above the streets, Varix could barely stay in the air anymore. His body shook violently from exhaustion. Fire from the cannon blast still burned across his scales. Slowly, the dragon began falling. Ethan watched in horror as Varix crashed into the ruined street nearby with enough force to shake the ground. Smoke rose around the giant dragon for one terrible Second, Ethan feared he was too late. Then he heard weak breathing. The human ran through rubble and fire toward him. Varix lay motionless beside collapsed buildings. His massive chest rose slowly with pain. Ethan reached his side and placed a hand against the dragon's scales carefully. Varix slowly opened one eye. Why his voice sounded weak and broken. Why did you not give up on me? Ethan looked at him with tears in his eyes because humans are stubborn. The dragon stared at him silently. Then something unbelievable happened. Tears slowly rolled down the face of the most feared dragon warrior in the galaxy. Not tears of pain, not tears of defeat, but tears from finally understanding something he never believed before. His life mattered, and for the first time in many years, Varix was glad he survived the night. Weeks passed after the battle for the capital. The city slowly rebuilt itself from the destruction left behind by the pirate invasion. Burned towers were repaired, broken streets filled with life again. Ships returned to the skies above the glowing city, but something else had changed too. The people no longer looked at Varix with hatred. Everywhere the dragon walked, citizens stopped and stared, not with fear anymore, with respect. The same dragon they once mocked had saved millions of lives. Children now pointed excitedly when he flew overhead. News stations called him the guardian of the capital. Even soldiers who once insulted him lowered their heads with honor when he passed by. But none of that mattered much to Varix anymore, because the biggest battle was never against pirates. It was against the darkness inside his own mind, and slowly, day by day, that darkness was losing. The dragon still had difficult nights, still carried painful memories from the war. Sometimes he woke up shaking after nightmares. Sometimes the old voices returned, telling him he was worthless. But now something was different. He was no longer alone with those thoughts. Every evening, Ethan still climbed to the rooftop after work, and every evening Varix joined him, not because he wanted to jump anymore, but because that rooftop had become the place where his life changed forever. One quiet morning, they sat together watching the sunrise spread across. The giant city golden light reflected across the towers while ships moved slowly through the sky. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Varix finally broke the silence. What if you never came that night? Ethan looked toward him quietly. The dragon lowered his head slightly. If you never walked onto that rooftop, I would be dead. The human stayed silent for a moment before answering softly. Then the galaxy would have lost someone important. Varix froze completely hearing those words. Important. Nobody had called him that in years. The dragon stared at the sunrise while emotions twisted inside his chest. Even after everything I did, Ethan looked directly at him. One mistake does not erase an entire life. The dragon slowly closed his eyes. All those years he believed he deserved pain, believed the world would be better without him. But now he finally understood something. Ethan had been trying to teach him from the beginning. Broken people are not useless. They just need someone who reminds them they still matter. Far below the rooftop, the city slowly awakened. Citizens filled the streets. Workers traveled between towers. Children laughed near glowing markets. Life continued everywhere around them. And for the first time in many years, Varix felt grateful to still be part of that world. Then suddenly, Ethan smiled mischievously. You know something funny? Varix looked toward him curiously. A month ago, you were standing on this rooftop, ready to jump. Now look at you. Big hero, dragon, protecting the whole city. Varix gave a deep, rough laugh that echoed across the rooftop. A real laugh. strong, and alive. The dragon looked toward the bright horizon. One last time, the same city that once felt cold and empty now looked beautiful. Not because the pain disappeared completely, but because hope finally existed beside it. And across the galaxy, other species slowly began learning something strange about humans. Humans were not the strongest race. They did not have the biggest armies, or the most powerful weapons. But humans had something terrifyingly rare, the ability to stand beside broken souls when everyone else walked away, the ability to sit beside someone in their darkest moment and simply say, "You are not alone anymore." And sometimes that was powerful enough to save a life.